Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of 3 great days. I think we're all very excited, myself included. And firstly, I want to thank Nike for hosting this and being here in this incredible environment, and thanking everyone again for attending. It is a privilege to be here in such a beautiful setting. And before we get going in the presentation, I wanted to acknowledge U.S. Soccer and the staff of people that are here today so we can put some faces to some names for perhaps some people who are not familiar. So in no particular order, I'm going to go through the staff that is here. So if the staff, if you could, just quickly stand up. We have, from coaches, we have Jesse Marsh from the senior national team. We have Thomas Rangan from the under-20s, Mike Makovich from the under-18s, Jimmy Barlow from the under-15s, Manny Schelscheid from the under-14 team. We also have our technical advisors, Chris Brewer from the Atlantic, Mike Dickey from the Mid-Atlantic, Tim Regan from the Frontier, Juan Carlos Machia from the Southeast, Hugo Perez from the Northwest, Rob Becerra from the Southwest, Anthony Latronica from Texas. We have Roberto Lopez from Great Lakes. We have Tony Lepore, who's a technical advisor as well as our director of scouting. Some other staff as well to mention. We have Dave Chesler here, the director of coaching. Eric Yamamoto, youth national team staff. Dave Vandenberg as well, who's helped out. Manny Clark and Kayla Porter. From the women's side, we have Jill Ellis, women's national team development director. April Heinrichs, Women's National Team Technical Director. We have Bill Irwin, the under-23 national team coach. We have some additional staff, Kat Mertz, Amy Griffin, and Alberto Montoya as well. I think it's important, wanted to mention, they're all here, and everyone can put a face to the name. So I want to thank everyone as well, lastly, the people I'm not going to mention who are very important from our side at U.S. Soccer as well as from Nike, the behind-the-scenes people. They know who they are, who work tirelessly day in, day out to make the people's job, who I just mentioned, easier. So thank you to you guys. You know who you are. So we are here today to discuss, as we mentioned a little bit, the curriculum and share it with everyone, the ideas behind it, and some key takeaways from the curriculum. I think many different people have seen bits and pieces of it today, and we're not going to get too much into it because everybody will get a copy at the end of it. We want to talk about a little bit more of the details and some key takeaways that we can all have collectively as a group here. So, why are we here? As I think you saw last night during the welcome reception of Dan Coyle, discussion that development of our coaches and players is the key to success in the future. For the last several years, we have been focused on improving the development environment for players and coaches, and this is the next step in our process. We started the focus on coaching a couple of years ago, and it is our goal to work with you, the leaders of the soccer community that are here today, to make coaches and players better. The development, I think we talk about it quite a bit, and it's the word that's been used, not only here in the US, but around the world, development. How do we make our better players? It's something that has become more and more important around the world. The biggest clubs in the world now in sort of an economic crisis are really now focusing as well their attention to their player development. It's a big, big topic around the world. And we simply talk about development itself as a word. You know, everyone in this room has had a path to get here. It's a combination of human development, which includes family, friends, and cultural backgrounds. We all have our unique situations with this. We have formal education process that we go through and we learn and we get to where we are today, our education process. And of course, in this case, we have the sport side of it, which is soccer. Everyone's path is different, but it brings us here together today. We can look back on our paths, and these 3 key points shape and mold us what we are today. And development, as far as a definition, I thought this was very important because I looked it up and thought, I mean, everybody knows what it is if we were to ask everyone. But looking it up in the dictionary, it's development, the process of developing or being developed. The process. Dan mentioned that word last night, Dan Coyle, and it really is the process that we're focusing on today. So what is our end game, our competition, right? The end game of this process is to have our national teams, both men and women, compete to win the World Cup. Produce players who are competing at the highest level of the sport, playing in Champions League finals, and continue to grow our professional leagues here in the US. Of course, better players and coaches make the games on the field better, and any hope of us catching these guys, the current world champions and the leading nations, is going to be done by a long process of working better. That's all of our goals and objectives for developing players. This is our competition. So we've made some progress in the last 20 years due to many of the people in this room. In 1990, we had just qualified for our first World Cup in 40 years. With a team made up of mostly college players, we have participated in every World Cup since 1990. We advanced out of the first round 3 times, reaching the quarterfinal in 2002. And in 2010, most recently, despite a heroic effort in the match against Algeria, we were eliminated in the round of 16. An incredible, incredible ride. We were all part of it, watching it, celebrating, again, this goal. But at the end, we felt we could have done more. Of course, we all remember 1999, the Women's World Cup, when our team became world champions in front of 90,000 people in the Rose Bowl. I've been part of that process with US Soccer as a player, and now in my current position as Youth Technical Director for over 2 decades. I saw this firsthand. I saw the day-to-day and the different processes and lived it. I had the opportunity to play in the Under-17 World Cup, represent the Under-20s, play in Olympics twice, and be selected for 4 World Cups. What this provided me was an in-depth look, not only our country, but what's going on around the world. We were able to constantly measure ourselves against the best. I was able to see the different trends that were changing from the different countries we played, and I experienced this firsthand. In 1989, a long time ago, we played Brazil in the Under-17 World Cup in Scotland, and we beat them 1-0. Again, a fantastic result, but if you look at that team of Brazilians and the US team, their whole team became professionals. We had 2 guys who became professionals. Although the result was great, in different times it wasn't on the internet. I'm sure today we would have all known about it. It was a small blip in the story, in the headlines. It was different times, but an incredible achievement. Everyone was excited, but we understand the greater picture was the development of players. I lived this whole process, and it gave me, like I said again, an incredible view on US soccer and all the work that's been done, but at the same time, how far we still need to go. On the other side of it, as I just mentioned, we still have a long way to reach our competition. We haven't advanced past the quarterfinals in any World Cup, have had no players in the finals of the Champions League, and haven't been to the Women's World Cup final since 1999. So while we have taken some great strides, we have a long way to go, and the world isn't waiting. They are just as hungry and aggressive as we are to achieve success. In the past 5 years, I've been traveling to some of the top countries and the leading nations around the world just to get an insight with some great relationships that I have to see what they're doing, the commonalities between the best countries in the world. In 2009, I traveled to Italy, who were the current world champions at the time, the 2006 world champions. I spent 2 days at Coverciano, which is a fantastic facility outside Tuscany, which is the home of the Italian Federation. I spent 2 days there speaking to coaches, instructors, and I sat in on the UEFA Pro license for 2 days. It was an incredible experience. The one takeaway I had, though, which struck me as pretty amazing and quite humbling, was when I was speaking to the coaches from Italy, here they were with a similar setting of great pictures and Cannavaro lifting the World Cup trophy, and I was in amazement looking around, and all the coaches that were sitting in front of me were talking about how they need to change, how the Italians need to change their whole system. And for me, it was incredible to see that here you had the world champions four-time world champions and current holders of the World Cup, and everybody was talking about how we need to overhaul, change our system if we're going to compete with the leading nations around the world. The Italians can do it. I think we also can understand that. Another story was when I was in Germany. I lived through this process where, and we all can agree that if you look at the best nations in the world over time, you probably have to say Brazil and Germany, from results, lead it in terms of their results in the World Cup, their production of players. And Germany as well, similar situation. After consecutive disappointments for Germany, quarterfinals being out, finishing with the Euros 2000 when they didn't qualify, they had to overhaul their system. Again, the Germans, the mighty Germans and Italians talking about change, talking about we need to do something different if we're going to keep up with the best teams in the world. Again, an incredible, incredible situation. Then on the other side of it, you have Brazil and Argentina. They're developing players by the thousands. These are three countries that I point out as references as what they're doing as well, but at the same time, they know they have a long way to go, and they want to change. They don't necessarily have maybe the long way that we have to go, but even these great countries are changing. So what can we do? I think we can complain about the state of our players and coaches. I often hear that. I think I've had discussions with so many different faces in here, coaches and players. We can keep talking about it, or we can really look forward to really collectively making a change for the better for our players. We have been very focused on the development process within the sport and putting pieces in place to take us to the next level. As we all know, there isn't a magic wand to do this, to make us great in a day. It's going to take a long time. So when we focus on development, as we mentioned earlier, the word process came up. That was really what it is. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a process. Doing the right things now so we can sustain change over the long haul, and we focus not only on players, but obviously on the coaches who have probably not received enough focus in the last many years. We've constantly been talking about players and why the players aren't good. You know, why aren't they good enough? Why are this and that? And it's conversation we all have. I have it all the time, and we're trying to figure out. But the reality is, we really have to look at ourselves now as coaches. What are we doing that are developing these players? That's what we're being judged on in the world market and in the leading nations around the world. When I travel around the world, I really represent we. I don't speak about I do this and I do that or that, because everyone wants to know what's happening in the US. So I'm a representation of the coaching force here. We are competing against the leading nations on developing players. And that has to be a very, very important note, that it's now with the idea that we start putting more focus on the coaches. Obviously, the coaches are connected to players, but really focusing on coaches and what we're doing day in, day out in our own environments. Here's a beautiful quote. Many people saw this game last year. My opinion, the best performance I've ever seen by a team. They beat, arguably, the second best team in the world, 5-0. It was amazing. Pep Guardiola, the 5-0 victory, isn't achieved with 4 training sessions. It's a long process. Guardiola about La Masia. I have a personal connection with Pep. It's kind of coincidence when I was at Man City. It's a Monday morning, and in walked in Pep Guardiola. He was on trial for 2 weeks. Man City didn't have the money they have today, unfortunately, and they couldn't offer him a deal. We were all disappointed. Pep's English wasn't very good. I latched onto him, took him to lunch, dinners. He didn't know Manchester at all, and we became friends. We started chatting. What I talked to him about was obviously his experiences. Barcelona, how he grew up. What struck me more than anything about him was him talking about his development. He wasn't talking about the Champions League trophy he won, the league titles he won. What he kept talking about was La Masia, his experience on developing as a player. He wasn't talking about the coaches and everything. He was talking about this incredible experience that until he got older, he didn't even realize what he was in. It was a dream for him, is what he was talking about. I recently went to visit him when he took over. He left there, as I mentioned, we didn't sign them, we didn't offer him a contract, which everyone was disappointed about. And his next option, when I talked to him, said, say, what are you going to do now that they didn't offer? He was finishing up his career in Qatar, and he was offered a position at Barcelona's B team. He quickly came up and became the coach. He had some trips, as many of you know, to the US, and I met him and we started chatting. First thing he mentioned was obviously his excitement, but the quality staff that he had next to him. Those were the people that made the difference every day for him. I went and visited him when they played Inter Milan and Real Madrid. They played Inter Milan in a group stage, and then they played Real Madrid in their first derby for that year. I got an insight and spent every day speaking to him after training sessions or before training sessions and seeing them train. So I asked him and I talked to him about it. I wasn't really talking too much about the first team, although obviously it's hard not to talk about that group of players. I was in amazement to see the level of play during training. And I talked to him about, what is so special about Messi, Iniesta, Xavi. And he stopped me right there and he said, this is what I tell everyone. Before anyone starts talking about these guys as players, they're the most humble, modest people you'll ever meet in your life, Claudio. And one morning, it wasn't that time we were speaking, Iniesta walked in and I was waiting in sort of a waiting room before I went into the training ground, as all guests do there. And Iniesta walked in, and I have to admit, he's one of my favorite players. I was like, wow, there's Iniesta. And he came over, and he shook my hand, and another gentleman who I believe was an agent, and said, how you doing? It resonated with me, the importance of every aspect of development. He didn't talk about how great they were with the ball, their vision. He knew I knew that. But that was his comment. That's the important way that they develop players in Barcelona. So where do we start, as we mentioned? We start with the coaches. Working with coaches gives us a chance to influence a far greater number of players across the country. Our objective is to provide you with a set of tools to drive the development process, and each club here has the opportunity to drive this message into their own communities. As leading coaches, director of coaches, technical directors, you have that ability to drive this message that we're presenting today to your local communities. So, one important tool that we can provide for coaches is the new curriculum. This provides us with a chance to give everyone the same information at the same time and provides an age-appropriate roadmap for coaches to guide players through their development process. In addition, we believe that working with you in a hands-on manner as we are today, but as well as through the Development Academy, with our technical advisors, will give us a truly real opportunity to collectively work together. If I look around the room, there's so many guys that I played with, that coach me, coaches' sons. The world, the connection of all of us is definitely one connection away. This big country that we have that everyone says, oh, it's so big. When I look around here, it's really a small circle. We're not that far from each other. And you guys could probably say the same. You look around, you have people maybe you played with, that you coached, and it makes me really excited to think, well, there really is a small circle of coaches in this big country that are connected in a way that can be very, very powerful moving forward. So, 4 things we want to take away when you think about implementing the new curriculum are development over winning, quality training, age appropriate, and having fun and inspiring your players. Development over winning. We talk about this all the time. Players are naturally competitive. Nowhere more than in this country. On my travels to Holland, I'm sure you've experienced it if anyone travels abroad, they're in amazement of our competitive attitude, how we love to win, this #1 culture. We're not going to change that, but we don't need to ramp that up anymore. In Holland, they talk about they wish that our players in Holland had some of that ability that the US players have, of just competing. The whistle blows, our kids want to win. We know that. That's one of our strengths. We are very proud about that. But at the same time, manipulating and thinking winning over development we're all making a huge mistake. We're shortcutting the development of players, and we need to, as I mentioned many times, really focus on this. Xavi picked out this quote that I thought really highlights the message. Some youth academies worry about winning. We worry about education. The rest of the quote reads as this. You see a kid who lifts his head up, who plays the pass first time, boom, and you think, yep, he'll do. Bring him in, coach him. Our model was imposed by Cruyff. It's an Ajax model. It's all about rondos, parentheses, monkey in the middle. Rondo, 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 every single day. It's the best exercise there is. You learn responsibility and not to lose the ball. If you lose the ball, you go in the middle. Boom, 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 boom. Always one touch. If you go in the middle, it's humiliating. The rest applaud and laugh at you. I don't know about for you guys, but when I see quotes or I hear players that are living right now in the top, reference points, it's Barcelona, it's Man U, the best national teams in the world, I think we can all just shut up and listen to people like this. They're living it day in. They lived it back in La Masia in their training ground. What a powerful quote. The first part of that is the most important. Some youth academies worry about winning. We worry about education. Development has become cultural at Barcelona. It's not optional. I think we need to develop this culture of development and education, and the people that are going to do that are in this room, as well as the many coaches around the country that everybody in this room can influence. The second point is quality training. Dan Coyle last night mentioned this and highlighted this. Again, no secret. Very simple. Make every session a quality training session. Come prepared. Don't waste time. Keep the players focused and active, especially at younger ages. We don't have enough training time to begin with, so let's focus on making each session as good as possible. I remember going to Bayer Leverkusen. I was 20 years old. I thought I had everything figured out. I was, getting trophies in UVA and all that kind of stuff. I had a really nice mullet at the time as well. And I arrived to Bayer Leverkusen, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have such a long way to go. I couldn't believe how much I still had to go to step into a game. On that team, and you have these moments, people that you look up to, people that you see. I had the opportunity to walk into a locker room and have Bernd Schuster, Rudy Fuller, and Paulo Sergio from Brazil. Bernd Schuster was one of my idols growing up. He played for Barcelona, he played at Real Madrid, and he played at Atletico Madrid. He's the first and only player to win the league and the cup on all three teams. Rudy Fuller, world champion, a world champion, sitting there in my locker room. My family's from Argentina, so there was a lot of uncles in there who would love to come in and get back to him for his perhaps dive in 1990, but there he was. Paulo Sergio was on the 94 squad in Brazil, another world champion. So I quickly realized, as did all the younger players, I started looking around all the younger players in the locker room, and everyone started looking at these guys. I obviously was like in amazement. The first training session I went out, and I was awestruck. I went home, and I couldn't believe what I just saw. What I saw was those three guys training harder and better and getting there earlier and leaving later than everybody else. They didn't arrive 1 minute before the time we had to be there. They arrived 30 minutes. They left after they ate. They trained every single day and made sure that they were the best players, that they earned from Monday to Friday the opportunity to play on Saturday. I remember seeing this every day for a year. I've mentioned it in many interviews. It was the most important year of my career because I realized, okay, this is why they're at that level. And if I take any of this from them, I will get to my next level. It was an unbelievable experience, and it was all about the training. The training habits, the coaching was great, but these guys at this level, all they talked about and all they did, they didn't talk much. They were humble, they were modest, and they were role models for all of us. It was an incredible experience, and again, highlighting quality training and how important that is for coaches to create that atmosphere and really push your players that little bit more. We all know last night, I think Dan mentioned that kind of comment of, we're in a comfort here. We have beautiful facilities. I'm all for beautiful facilities because we need them in this country. There's so many more than when I grew up. When you look around the different countries and the clubs you have, there's fields that we can play on. But again, can we push the players that little bit more, as that experience told me? The next key point I want to talk about is age appropriate. It's one of the key elements later we'll talk about in the curriculum. But again, providing players with too much too soon leads to confusion and hurts development. We don't need coaches teaching 8-year-olds zonal defending or an offside trap. Just like we don't teach a second grader calculus. It's the same idea, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but age appropriate. Kids learn rapidly, but at different stages of their life. So this is very important, and this is the third of the 4 key points we want to take away. Again, legendary manager, another person that I look up to in any quote. I love listening to him. Again, age appropriate. At a young age, winning is not the most important thing. The important thing is to develop creative and skilled players with good confidence. Arsene Wenger, French, works in England, the global game, there's such a mix. But again, someone like him, he's been at the highest level, we can all learn from someone like this. Making a point like that in terms of supporting what needs to be done at the right ages, it kind of hammers in a few things there, developing over winning, creating at young players. Amazing. One of the best managers of the modern time. The last one is to have fun and inspire your players. Again, we heard from Dan last night, and believe me, we didn't coordinate this, but when he was saying that and he talked about that, I thought, wow, this hammers home exactly one of the most important parts of what we work in. We work with kids. If we make it fun, we're going to inspire them. Soccer is a great fun game. It's given all of us so much. Let's make sure we create an environment that players want to come back to our training sessions and continue with the fun. He mentioned last night, Dan, about coaches, and he mentioned this and it resonated with me more than anything, because he said how coaches, the best coaches say 4 seconds on average, I think he mentioned, information. And it quickly got me thinking, because in interviews, when people ask me, who was the best coach you ever had? I have said in many interviews, it's clearly been Dick Advocaat. Under the Rennes Michels trees, he came out as well. And I said this in interviews, and I said this in quotes, and they said, well, why was he the best coach? And I said, well, he made it so simple for us. And on top of it, he was the coach that said the least to me. He was the guy that I spoke to the least ever of any of my coaches, that even had interactions. It was sometimes a little bit uncomfortable for players. He was known as a little general. But in my experience at Rangers with Dick Advocaat, and Dan mentioned this last night, was spot on in that. Boom, quick messages. Do this, stand here, get back on defense. Boom, boom. It was right to the point, very clear and simple. And again, it was a lot of fun playing for him. The players we had on the team, we had the influence of having a lot of different Dutch players, and it was an incredible experience for me. And again, tying that in, I think, is an important note for coaches about the information we give our players. Quote here from the great Pelé: "Success is no accident. It is hard work, perseverance, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you are doing or learning to do." Again, very powerful. Have fun and inspire your players. There's an incredible, incredible message there. So, the curriculum. The new curriculum sets the baseline for all coaches in specific age-appropriate blocks. You can use this material if you're coaching 5-year-olds once a week or 18-year-olds in the Development Academy. In fact, at the younger ages, with the most players and with the less experienced coaches, as we know, we have volunteer coaches, we have, again, parents who take over or people with less experience. If we provide them with a base level of information, they have an opportunity to provide a better environment for the kids. And if they raise it 5%, 10%, then the next step of coaches will get better players. So it's very important that we can provide this information to the younger age groups that are the building blocks. Also, every age builds upon the next. So mastering the basics is critically important. As an example, you can't go into 9th grade if you can't read properly. And it's the same with soccer. Obviously, that's an example, but in the curriculum, it's a process of getting kids to make sure that year by year, we can provide the recipe for the coaches to teach the kids they need to learn at the specific time. It's designed to be simple. As we have here, your mother should be able to use this. And it was very important. That was a very key part of this curriculum, is to make sure that it's simple and allow everyone to be able to use it. There'd be no sense in having things and words and messages in there that are confusing. I think it wouldn't help anyone. It's very important, from the volunteer coach who never played, or a World Cup player who's recently retired, if we follow the recipe, we will be fine, and once we have mastered the recipe, we can add our own variations to the base level. Again, the partners in development, that's us, right? Pushing each other. We're all together. I know it's easier said than done, but we are. We need to be. We need to be pushing each other and pushing the envelope. Everyone here is partners in this development process. We can provide the recipe, and everyone take it, adapt it, and back in your own day-to-day environments where the difference is going to be made. So, we want to use this to the 4 takeaways in the curriculum in your club, and then take it and offer it to the community. The more people we have on the same page, the better opportunity we have to create real change. In my travels, again, I was talking to people about, well, especially the best clubs. We talk about Ajax and Barcelona and developing players. And the one thing that stood out to me was that it was a plan. Of all the places, it was very clear there was a plan from beginning to end on developing players. And they just simply said, well, it's logical. It's easier if we're all on the same pages. Our coaches don't need to worry about it. We sort of provide them the tools, how we want them to play, and then they go out and do it. There's no coach coming into Ajax or Barcelona and changing what they're doing. It's built in, and I think that's the same, and that's very important that we're on the same page, and that will provide us all with the possibility of improving and developing better players. So, now let's get into the curriculum a little bit. When we started the process of creating the curriculum, we wanted to, first of all, define a style of play. Without doing that and having an end vision for our coaches and our players, it's very difficult. Everyone's sort of on their own trying to develop players, of course, doing their best effort, but if we don't define how we want to play, then we're all sort of still, doing our own thing. And I think this was the most important part of the curriculum, because you can have all the information, but if it doesn't lead to an end goal, similar to school, we don't educate kids just to educate them. We sort of say, well, to provide them an opportunity to prepare them for the world, whatever we say. It's the same thing. So that was an important part of it. What I did more than anything in terms of when we started to look at the curriculum was to use myself as an example. What I went through, and be very honest with, well, what helped me and what happened and where I was lagging. No one knew myself better than me and my experiences, as well as the different relationships that I had. And as Dan mentioned last night, yes, there's generally across the board within the curriculum a lot of stealing, as he mentioned. There's nothing new, but it's putting it all together and providing a direction and very clear to everyone. And the style and principle of play is the beginning part of it, and you'll see this later. Everyone will have a copy when they leave. That's the first part of it. And I think that's the end goal that everyone's doing, how we're trying to play. The Development Academy clubs, the representatives here, we spoke about this a little bit, and I think that was the most important part, really, how we want to play. Going around, again, many different places we looked and defined where we can get, it really was the focus on the modern game. Looking at the top clubs and the national teams around the world and say, well, what are they doing? What are the commonalities between Spain, Holland, Germany, Brazil, Argentina? And try to mix it, obviously, and understand that we can't become one of them. We have to develop our own style and put this into an American landscape. And that's very, very important. So the world references on it from the leading nations, but the most important part of that is that we apply it here into the US and really create our own style. This will be the biggest driving force of development for coaches and players in the future. So when we examine all these top nations and clubs, from the top leagues, from Spain and England, France, Germany, Italy, Brazil, and Argentina, thrown out a few, these were the 4 things that are very common. The teams keep possession, they control the game, they create more chances, and they run less. The 4 commonalities, whether it's the Barcelona that we love today and everyone's a fan of, or it's Man United because it's built into their own system in their own country, these are the 4 things. Keeping possession, therefore leads to controlling the game, that leads to creating more chances, and you run less. Again, a recipe for long-term success is what these coaches, these clubs and institutions have figured out before the other clubs that are chasing them. This is the 4 commonalities that I want to put forth that, again, will be put into the curriculum and, again, defines a little bit of the style of play. Another quote from Xabi. Style of play. You pressure, you want possession, you want to attack. Combine, pass, play. That's football. I think it's pretty simple, right? The rest of the quote, or the entire quote, I really want to read this quote because I thought it was a great quote. It's good that the reference point for world football right now is Barcelona, that it's Spain. Not because it's ours, but because of what it is. Because it's an attacking football. It's not speculative. We don't wait. You pressure, you want possession, you want to attack. Some teams can't or don't pass the ball. What are you playing for? What's the point? That's not football. Combine, pass, play. That's football, for me at least. And I think for everyone in here as well. I mean, we all love them, but again, they stick to it. They're faithful to it. They don't lose sight of that when they lose a game. They stick to it. Even when they got knocked out against Inter Milan, they didn't change anything. They continue in their way, and it's very important, that style of play, that I don't only just say and announce it up here, but that we really remain faithful to it. That we remain faithful to it wherever we are and whatever leagues we play on, that we're developing attacking players. And again, some of the same reference points I'm making. You develop players in an attacking system. If we have defensive systems in the youth game that are holding on for 1-0 victories, we're not developing players. The message is, can we go and have entertaining games? I don't want to go to a youth game and be bored like the World Cup final. I don't know about you guys, but one of the things when I go to a youth game, I'm not analyzing whether the movements is right and all, because they're kids. They still don't know. They're going to make mistakes. Soccer's a game of mistakes. But is it entertaining? Are they trying to score? And especially for the younger players, when I see U12 and under, that's what I want to see. I want to go to a game and see kids creating chances and everyone's excited and the game is going back and forth. But what do I see sometimes? I see 7, 8 players in the final third defending, booting it up to the fast guy. I think everybody kind of knows the story. It's not new. And what is that? What are we doing to the kids? It's clear that it's winning over development. It's not difficult. We speak to the technical advisors and the scouts out there. I think you can pull up to a game and within 5-10 minutes, take a picture of everything and see they're trying to do it right, maybe they're not. And again, we have to really commit and be faithful in youth development to having an attacking game. Let players play. What if Barcelona done more than anyone? It's like some great mystery. Well, Xavi and Iniesta maybe 10 years ago, one would be replacing the other, right? That was the soccer back then. Oh, you only have one playmaker. They said, no way. That's why they're ahead of the game. They're putting attacking players. They have extra players in attack, and that's something that we want to implement into our youth development. Attack. That will force and develop coaches over time to develop attacking players and an attacking style. So again, it's something that's very important. It's one of the key things. We had a video there that we couldn't get going, but we do have the opportunity later to watch the Copa del Rey final. So for everyone who wanted to see that, I think we're going to squeeze that in. So again, our style, it's offensive-minded, quick transitions, and position-specific. And again, I see people taking notes. This is all in the curriculum if you're going to get it later. But again, just so everybody knows that you'll be getting that later. Again, so looking at the leading nations, again, this is what we saw. They're offensive-minded, the quick transitions when they lose the ball from offense to defense and vice versa, and position-specific. On defense, organized. On offense, free-flowing and moving. Very simple. These are some of the key points that we use, again, to evaluate some of the development academy clubs. We've mentioned this, and we've had conversations with them. Again, it's so important that we develop this culture in our country for the long term. So the creation of the curriculum. Mention all the different global influences. And once we define the style of play, we built upon to develop the curriculum itself, and again, looked around the world at all the countries we mentioned. And we really wanted to make sure that it's for the future game. We're not developing for today because the 8, 9, 10-year-olds, we're developing for the future. So everybody has seen presentations or talked about it. The game is getting faster, it's getting quicker, it's less pace, it's more physical. I would doubt that that's going to go the other direction. We think that's going to continue to improve for the future. So again, the thought of the curriculum, so everyone understands, is we're developing players for the future game, not for the game we see today. And I think, again, and I know we're referencing, and I'm referencing Barcelona, Arsenal's another team, Man United, they understood this. They started implementing this sort of future game before the other clubs or countries, and that's why they've taken a big leap. So some of the influences. The Spanish Federation, Real Madrid, Barcelona. I'd like to make a special note to Javier Perez. He's a major contributor and author of the curriculum. He's here later and will be with Paco de Miguel, our later presenter, out on the field. Javier spent 6 years at Real Madrid, working in the youth sector department for 6 years. He developed a master's license at the Spanish Federation, PhD in exercise physiology, has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of background. More than anything, he's a very close friend of mine, and he's been a mentor for me personally, living in the US the last 3 years, and has been an incredible, I guess, mentor for me in education. So wanted to make that note. Some of the other influences, we have the Netherlands and Ajax. They have sort of a global, they have a holistic approach to the game there, something that we'll talk about a little bit later. You look at Germany. Again, as we mentioned, there's a competitiveness and the mental part of the game that we know gets them through so many different tough games. It's something we want to bring in and re-emphasize. Argentina, Brazil, technical quality. The amount of players that they're developing is based on the technical quality. You go to Argentina, Brazil, as so many have here, I'm sure, and also South America, and there are thousands of players everywhere you look, and they are committed to development. Again, some of the influences where we come, more than anything, it's just the leading nations around the world, as I mentioned before. The Brazilians didn't go to Italy to learn basketball. They came here. All the top teams around the world that wanted to get better at basketball or who had interest in basketball, they learned from our coaches. At the same time, I think we need to open up, look outside, take those ideas, and bring them here to the US. And we need to apply them here. We're going to make the difference. Foreign coaches come here. They've helped out. Some have moved here. We have a lot of different nationalities within this room. But within the US, we have to focus that we're going to make the difference. The next part, so the style and principles of play in the curriculum. There's information, and first of all, we talked about the style of play, which I just talked about. The next part of it is the principles of play, and within there, it's going to be for coaches, players, and teams. The three sort of triangles that are consistent. You don't do coaching development without player development, because coaches are obviously coaching players. And then we talk about winning at development, but what better opportunity than a match to see our work during the week? So it's another thing I look at. If a coach is on the sideline making tons of changes and screaming and yelling all the time, I think, what did you do Monday to Friday? Again, that's where we want to focus the work. Not the Saturday and the Sunday, but the Monday through Friday. And also drive that message into the players. In our culture, the players love playing. I'm sure you could see it. They sort of train at this level, then come Saturday, Sunday, you're like, whoa, they're playing up here. We need to get them to train up there. That's a very, very important part of it. The next part of the curriculum in terms of the sections, we have the styles and principles of play. We have the concepts and coaching philosophy. We have the 4 key components. Those haven't changed. You have tactical, technical, physical, and psychosocial. This is our common language, this section of the curriculum. We often talked about that. I think it's important that we bring in everything, all the information that everyone gets and sees, but into one sort of powerhouse and a common language that we can all use, not only for today, but as well as for future generations and future coaches. This is also, this particular slide is important because I want to talk about the coaching philosophy. The influence, as I mentioned, and what the people in the leading nations that I've seen around the world. Again, these are the 4 components. They're evident in every match, whether it's under 9, professional game. These are the 4 components that are wrapped around every game. And what you see around the world is at the leading nations, they teach all of these components, especially the tactical, technical, and physical, because the psychosocial is more mental and interaction. It's constantly there, but you develop the mentality, and they really are all together, wrapped in one. But they coach these 4 components at the same time. We could say it's match-like. We can say it's related to the match, whatever the game. A lot of times we talk about teach how we play. These 4 components, in terms of the coaching philosophy, to be clear, as you'll see in the curriculum, in the exercises that are provided as well at a later date for all the stages, this will be evident. This will be consistent in all of it. The coaching philosophy that I've seen at the leading nations around the world is these elements are wrapped in all the time. The KMVB, in their presentation that I've seen, they describe it as the actions on the field should not be separated. Again, very important because this is something that we want to get out there, is that the 4 components in the philosophy, can we teach it at the same time? Because that's what a player at any age is going to encounter on the weekend during the game. So the next sequence, so we had the style and principles of play. We have the coaching content and guidelines, as well as the philosophy, is, as we mentioned, the age group organization. Working in the right areas at the right time. You'll see the examples in the book as well. For the 4, as we mentioned, there'll be the slide you see up here. There'll be also, for all 4 components, you'll see the age-appropriate progression. An example here, I think everyone could see that. This is the technical part of it. Down the left column, you have all the technical needs to learn, from passing, receiving, down to 1v1 defending. An example here is that you have heading, U6 and U7. A blank means that they don't need to be working on it. The relevance and dedication that you put into it. I don't need to explain why, because I don't think any of us, if we can think back, wanted to head a ball. And then you see the progression that it's a little bit more as you go up. Again, passing, receiving, being faithful to the document and what we're talking about is a 5. Shooting is a 5. Just to give you an example, you have the 4 stages above there that I'll mention after, or we'll see in a previous slide. But this is an example of what you see in the curriculum when you guys receive it. The last part of it is planning and training. You have season, macro cycle, which is multiple weeks, 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks. The week and the individual session within that week. So going in progression from style and principles of play to coaching content and guidelines, age appropriate, and now putting that in to planning, how we plan. We're lucky later to have a presentation from Paco de Miguel to be talking on this at the professional level, but in the curriculum, we've made it accessible to coaches at the youth level. So everyone can look at it, whether it's, as we mentioned earlier, a mother who doesn't know what to do, but can get the exercises, somewhat structure a training session, a week, and then go out there and put on a better exercise than she would have if she didn't have the information. From a planning perspective, if you have 12 one-hour training sessions in a month and waste 10 minutes per session, whether it's starting, whether it's kids go to get water and come back, I think we all know the story, especially for the younger ones, you can waste up to 2 entire sessions in an entire month. Time wasted that the kids aren't working. So this isn't more important than the other, but we really want to highlight in this core curriculum that they're all interrelated, and this last part, planning and training, is very, very important. In this part, again, we'll have for all the seasons, for all the age groups, each age will have a season plan. What this is up here is all the information you saw before from the technical, and here you have the example, you have tactical, technical, physical, and psychosocial put into one season plan, which has objectives, helps you with organization, and also by the end of the year, goals that you try to achieve. Again, this will be a tool for coaches for particular age groups, and it'll give them that guide that they can use to go out and focus on the right things at each age. So we'll have this from U6 to U18, and they're in the curriculum. Some of the other things that are in the curriculum, and I'll go through these a little bit quickly, but quicker, we have a planning for 12 weeks. And the idea of this is that within the younger ages particularly, it's more or less how long the season goes. It's 12 weeks, you know, in the fall or in the spring or in the winter, depending on where we are in the country. So this gives you an example of a 12-week plan. This is, again, an example of a weekly plan. So we have the initial, basic, intermediate, and advanced. Again, just an example to get an idea. And then the last thing within the curriculum that you received today is example training sessions per stage. So the 4 stages is the initial stage from U6 to U8, the basic stage from U9 to U12, and then moving on is the intermediate stage, U13 and U14, and the advanced stage, which is up here. As well as receiving today in the curriculum, these are examples at the end of it in the planning section. There'll be practices for each stage, total of about 500, that will focus on an objective, as we'll see here. The attacking principles, as you see, is in blue, and the color coordination is that we have green is technical, blue is tactical, and red is physical. What that means, remember, as I mentioned before, that's the objective and the focus, but we always have to teach everything. We don't focus in on it's only this, because we have to make sure that there's other elements of the game as coaches we're teaching. But just to give a guide, that'll be some of the information that everybody will be walking out with today. So, curriculum integration. Where can and how can we start getting this out? From youth teams to coaching schools to the development academy to youth national teams. And most importantly, talking to everyone in here, is the soccer communities that in here you guys influence, that we all can influence. Taking the curriculum back to where you are and helping the younger ages, the people that have less experience, showing them at least where it is so they can use it. And for me, the soccer community, the coaching schools, the development academy, the youth national teams, and everybody else, to be honest, one family. I think the curriculum, I really believe the curriculum could be that vital piece that we know, whether in Washington, D.C., or the state of Washington, or California, that we know more or less, we're on the same page. It's very, very important that we can do this, and that you can do this. Comes down to the influencers that are in this room, to go and spread that message. As we look to the future, as I mentioned before, the competition is not within this room. It's not within this room. We need to wake up right now and understand that our competition is the world. It isn't the team in Tampa trying to beat the team across the river in Sarasota. It's not. I'm sorry, I know there's sometimes it happens. We're competitive. We want to beat our neighboring clubs and our neighboring town team. But our competition is the world. We are being judged in developing players on the world market. I've had in previous presentations talked about where our top players are playing. They're not playing in the top 5 teams in the top 5 leagues in the world. That has to be one of our goals. If we start having players playing in the top leagues in the world, I think there's a better chance of us improving. There's a better chance of our national teams improving at all levels. And that's got to be very, very important when we leave here. I'm not competing against Brian McBride. We're together. We're all together. When we look at it at the end, it's not just going to be me. Absolutely not. But when I travel abroad, as I mentioned earlier, they say, well, what's going on there? The development of players comes back to what we are all collectively doing. And in Spain at the moment, and in Brazil and Argentina, they get credit. We have to say, those are the ones doing it right. They're doing something right. And that's what we have to realize, is the competition is the world. It's not in this room. And hopefully, and I really believe, knowing the people in this room, the passion and all the work that you guys have put in for years, and will continue to put in for years in youth development, I really believe that we can make the difference, that we can close the gap on the world. So again, the 4 takeaways from today. Development over winning, as we talked about. Being faithful to it. Being really faithful to it. Every single day, are the players, are the kids the most important thing? That's what I worry about. That's what I talk about. That's my only goal, is making the players, and of course the coaches who teach them, all of us better. I do not like to talk about rule changes and this. I actually fall asleep and I'm not that excited about it. The game is what I love. The game is what gave me everything. Put the players' intentions always first. If we do that, we can make a huge difference immediately. Quality training. All of us, again, making it better. Dan mentioned it last night. Every single time you have the opportunity to influence a player. Very important. Age appropriate. Age appropriate, as we talked about. And having fun and inspiring your players. The 4 takeaways with the curriculum and everyone in this room that we can take away from. And again, as I mentioned, we for so long have said, well, the players. It's the coaches that make the difference. The coaches make the difference. It is going to be up to us, the teachers, the educators. We are the ones that are continue to push the envelope and make better players for the future. Again, implementing it in your club, educate your community. Not everyone, we couldn't invite everyone. We have, I think, 150 people in Nike. Again, thanking them for bringing them. We'd love to have more, but we had to kind of draw the line so we could fit it in. Go back, talk to your clubs, talk to the communities, talk to the clubs you work with in your areas to say, this is what we're going to do together. It's very, very important. And it's going to be, as I mentioned before, up to you guys to bring us all together. I want to end with this, which I thought was pretty powerful. There is no one I learned from more than Rinus Michels. I often try to imitate him, and that's the greatest compliment one could give. Johan Cruyff, Xavi mentioned him earlier. The credit that he's given to someone else. And Cruyff now, people said he's difficult to work with. He's got these ideas, and he's very, very committed and focused. And again, him mentioning Rennes Michels, we all can have those influences around. If Johan Cruyff could listen and learn from someone else, we all can. And this would be a great tribute to any coach in this room. If anybody could turn back one day and say, the greatest influence was someone in this room, it's something that you guys can be proud of. It's one of the most consistent things we mentioned last night. The humbleness and the selfless devotion that we have to have. We're not in a job where we're going to get media attention. We're all in youth development. It's important that we're behind the scenes as coaches, making the difference for the players. It's about them. Humble, hardworking, selfless devotion to the players is what we need. Again, it's been an incredible, for me, path to get here. And I'm blessed to have met so many people along the way, as I mentioned before, that got me here. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier, this is, I feel, just the beginning. We need to make a really big, big difference collectively. Today we start. There's been a lot of work, but we take one more step forward. And I look forward to seeing you, everybody, and getting to know and connect with some familiar faces for the rest of the day and the rest of tomorrow as well, looking forward, and our presenters. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. Excited to see everyone, and we'll follow up now with a little break, followed by Paco de Miguel. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you.